The Forgotten Schoolyard. Lily had always been curious, sometimes too curious for her own good. As a junior at Riverview High, she had heard all the urban legends about their school, but dismissed most of them as exaggerated tales passed down by bored students over the years. Riverview High was a large, Gothic-styled building built in the early 1900s and had a reputation for being haunted. Lily wasn't sure if she believed in ghosts, but she loved investigating, and her close friends Jess, Noah, and Ben often tagged along for her adventures. One October evening, as a chilling autumn wind howled outside, Lily overheard Mr. Grayson, the janitor, talking to the school librarian about the Forgotten Schoolyard. Intrigued, she eavesdropped and managed to catch snippets of their conversation. It seemed that there was an old, hidden part of the school, an abandoned courtyard that had been locked up and hidden away decades ago after a tragic incident. Determined to uncover the truth, Lily approached her friends with the idea. They were skeptical at first but eventually agreed, tempted by the mystery. Besides, it was nearly Halloween, and a little adventure seemed like the perfect way to celebrate. The following Friday, Lily and her friends met outside the school around midnight. The air was thick with fog, and the moon cast a pale glow over the campus, casting eerie shadows across the ground. Riverview High loomed over them, its dark windows like empty, unblinking eyes. "Are we really doing this?" Jess asked, shivering slightly and hugging her jacket close. "We've come this far," Lily replied, clutching a flashlight and looking determined. "If we don't go in, we'll never know." Ben, who was usually the most hesitant of the group, nodded. "Fine, but let's make it quick, all right?" They quietly slipped through a side door, careful not to make a sound. The hallways were dark and empty, with only the faintest hint of light filtering through the cracked windows. They moved through the building like shadows, following Lily as she led them toward the back of the school. She had spent days studying old maps of the building and was certain that the Forgotten Schoolyard lay somewhere beyond the storage area near the old gym. After a few minutes of navigating through the maze-like hallways, they found themselves in front of a large, rusted door. A heavy chain hung across it, fastened with a padlock. But someone, perhaps a student before them, had cut through the chain at some point, leaving the padlock hanging loosely. Lily shot them a triumphant look. "Looks like someone left it open for us." With a mixture of excitement and trepidation, they pushed the door open and stepped through. They entered a narrow corridor that was musty and dark, the walls lined with faded posters from decades past. The air was thick and heavy, carrying an almost suffocating stillness. It felt like they had crossed a threshold into another world, one that had been forgotten by time. At the end of the corridor, they found another door, this one cracked open slightly, revealing the faint outline of the courtyard beyond. As they stepped outside, the sight before them left them speechless. The courtyard was small, enclosed on all sides by tall, crumbling walls. Overgrown ivy clung to the stone, and the ground was covered in brittle, dead leaves. But what caught their attention was the statue in the center of the yard. A life-size stone sculpture of a young girl in a school uniform, her face contorted in an expression of terror. Her hands were raised as if trying to ward off something unseen. "That's creepy," Noah muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily nodded, unable to look away from the statue's eyes, which seemed almost too lifelike. "Who would make a statue like that?" Jess shivered, taking a step back. "Let's look around and leave. I don't like this." As they began to explore, they noticed strange symbols carved into the stone walls. Jess traced her fingers over one of the symbols, but quickly pulled her hand back, saying it felt unnaturally cold to the touch. Despite the chilly October air, a clammy warmth seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. "I feel like we're not supposed to be here," Ben murmured, shifting nervously. Just then, a distant sound echoed through the air. It was faint, like a distant cry, but it sent chills down their spines. They all exchanged worried glances. Did you hear that?" Jess whispered. Before anyone could answer, the sound grew louder, and it wasn't a cry anymore. It was the sound of children's laughter, echoing through the courtyard. It seemed to come from all directions at once, an eerie melody that was both playful and menacing. "This isn't funny," Noah said, his voice trembling. Lily, let's go. Now. But Lily was mesmerized, her eyes locked on the statue. Wait, she whispered, barely able to move her gaze. I think it's watching us. The others turned to look, and in that moment, they saw it too. The statue's face, once frozen in fear, seemed to have shifted ever so slightly. The eyes, once staring blankly ahead, now seemed to follow their every move, almost as if the girl in stone was alive. Panic surged through them, and Jess grabbed Lily's arm. We're leaving. Now. They turned to leave, but as they approached the door, it slammed shut with a deafening bang. Ben rushed forward, trying to pull it open, but it wouldn't budge. The laughter grew louder, filling their ears, as if mocking their fear. No, 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 Ben muttered, pounding on the door in desperation. The ground beneath them began to rumble, and cracks appeared in the stone floor. A foul smell wafted up from the cracks, like decaying flesh, and the air grew colder by the second. In the center of the courtyard, the statue seemed to shift again. This time, it raised one arm, pointing directly at Lily. Stop it, Lily shouted, clutching her head. She could feel a pressure building, a suffocating weight that seemed to press down on her. And then she heard it. A voice, soft and ghostly, whispering directly into her ear. She won't let you leave. Who? Who won't let us leave? Lily cried, spinning around, but there was no one there. The laughter stopped, and an eerie silence fell over the courtyard. The only sound was the soft rustling of leaves, as if something unseen was moving among them. Jess whimpered, clutching Noah's arm, and Ben stared at the ground, his face pale with terror. Just as they thought it couldn't get worse, the shadows began to shift, twisting and merging until they formed the shape of a young girl. Her eyes were hollow and dark, her mouth twisted into a grin that was far too wide, her arms stretched out toward them. Help me? The shadow girl whispered, her voice a haunting echo. They left me here. They forgot me. Without thinking, the group backed away, but there was nowhere to run. The walls seemed to close in around them, trapping them in this twisted, decaying version of the courtyard. The shadow girl advanced slowly, each step leaving a trail of darkness in her wake. We didn't do anything, Jess cried. We don't even know who you are. The girl stopped, tilting her head in a strange, unnatural way. They forgot me, she repeated, her voice filled with an eerie calm. Now you'll stay here, like I did. Ben, desperate, reached into his pocket and pulled out a small lighter. He flicked it on, hoping that the light would somehow ward off the spirit. But instead, the shadow girl recoiled, her face twisting into an expression of rage. You can't leave, she shrieked, her voice echoing across the courtyard. The cracks in the ground widened, and the walls around them seemed to pulse as if alive. The entire courtyard was coming to life, feeding off their fear. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the walls began to ooze a dark, tar-like substance. Run! Noah shouted, grabbing Lily's hand and pulling her toward the door. They pounded on it with all their strength, and to their shock, it finally gave way, swinging open to reveal the school hallway beyond. They bolted through the door, not daring to look back. They ran down the hallways, their footsteps echoing in the empty school. It wasn't until they burst out into the fresh night air that they finally stopped, gasping for breath. The school was silent, and the fog had cleared, revealing a perfectly ordinary building. But something felt different, darker, colder. Lily looked back at the door they had come through, and to her horror, she saw the faint outline of the shadow girl standing just inside, her empty eyes staring at them with a mixture of longing and rage. And then, just as quickly as she had appeared, she vanished, leaving only the memory of her haunting face imprinted in their minds. The next day at school, they tried to put the experience behind them, chalking it up to a shared nightmare. But as they walked through the hallways, they noticed something strange. The students and teachers seemed oblivious to their presence, almost as if they were invisible. When they tried to speak, no one responded, and it was as though they weren't there at all. That was when they realized the terrible truth. They hadn't escaped.